There we go. Thanks, Sean. Thank you, Senator Kavanagh. Please go ahead.
I think I've achieved my first goal, which is successfully unmuting myself. Is that correct? Can people hear me?
We hear you.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. First of all, thanks to CoDA for hosting this forum, and of course for all of your many years of advocacy and representation of the community of the Lower East Side, which I am proud to live in. And although much of my Senate district was new to me when I became a senator in 2017, obviously I've represented parts of the part that CoDA represents for a very long time. So it's great to see everybody. It is, of course, odd, like many things are odd these days, to do this in a virtual format. So it's hard to sort of go around the room and acknowledge all the folks, but I want to acknowledge John and Aura, the district leaders, and the leadership of the club, some of whom I assume are not on my screen, but are here. And, I noticed there are a few folks from other clubs in our community who are here today. So it's great to see everybody. I'm Brian Kavanagh. I am the incumbent senator for the 26th Senate District, which includes parts of the Lower East Side, basically almost all of Lower Manhattan, more or less south of Houston Street, and also a large swath of Brooklyn, Greenpoint, Williamsburg, down through Brooklyn Heights, Cobble Hill, Carroll Gardens, a bunch of other neighborhoods along the way. I really am grateful for the opportunity to represent all of you in the legislature and to work with constituents and local advocates and colleagues at all levels of government. We've had in the last few years a really transformative time in state government. Since the Democrats won a majority in the Senate to complement that longstanding majority in the Assembly, we really have been transforming every aspect of the state's laws and policies and budget priorities. And again, I'm really grateful for this opportunity to have been part of that. As legislators, I really believe it's our most important job to affect change through laws and to negotiate a state budget that reflects our values. And again, I think we've been extraordinarily successful at that in the last few years, although there's obviously a lot more to come. And I have been a leader in the Senate in making sure we deliver on the progressive change that New Yorkers need. So I'm really proud of our accomplishments in so many areas. I doubt we'll have time to talk about all of them today, but the first is, as chair of the Senate Housing Committee, I have led the process of transforming our rent laws and our housing programs to make sure that everybody has a decent, stable, affordable, safe place to live. The Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019 eliminated just about all of the loopholes in the rent laws, protecting 2.5 million New Yorkers, and also transformed eviction procedures and many other things across the state, and led, even before COVID, to a very significant reduction in evictions, both in New York and across the state. COVID in the beginning in 2020 obviously became a prime focus for all of us. I know it was a very brutal time for a lot of people. All of us, including myself, lost friends and loved ones, and especially tough time for parts of our community that are disadvantaged in regular times, and certainly the pandemic highlighted those disadvantages. So as in the housing sphere, I made sure that we had an eviction and foreclosure moratorium in place from the beginning of the pandemic, through pushing for executive orders and actions of the court. When those lapsed, because Andrew Cuomo allowed the moratorium to expire at the latter part of 2020, we took the statutes and we passed 3 laws that are the strongest state legislative moratoria in the country, and those are still in place until January 15th of next year. We've done them about 4 months at a time. And obviously, as the pandemic continues, we're still in a state with about 35 deaths a day from COVID. We still have to look and see how we have to use that tool to continue to protect people. Similarly, we created an enormous rental assistance program. It's $2.6 billion of federal money plus $250 million of state money. That program has been very successful at paying $2 billion, of covering $2 billion worth of rent. We are currently in the process of trying to get more money from the federal government. I am concerned that this governor, who has done a lot of good work in this area, is not seeking enough money from that program to the federal government. I'm pushing for a lot more, but we've requested $1 billion more and hoping to see good news on that front soon. during the pandemic, many other areas, we made sure that people had access to unemployment funds, which were really critical at the beginning of the pandemic, including revamping that system and in some cases just advocating constituent by constituent for people to get it, recognizing that many people were ineligible for basically any of the federal relief available. New York passed a $2.1 billion excluded worker fund, which mostly addressed folks who, because of immigration status, were unable to access unemployment, but also addressed freelancers and others that could not qualify for that relief. We have now spent all of that $2 billion to meet those critical needs. I am joining my colleagues in trying to replenish that fund along with the rental assistance fund. We passed the nation's most ambitious climate change legislation in 2019, the Climate Leadership and Protection Act. We have a tremendous amount of work to do, both to implement that and in some cases to enhance the goals, but it is the strongest state legislation in the country and exceeds most jurisdictions, including internationally. I would note that New York State is the 10th biggest economy in the world, even including other nations. So we have a big part to play in addressing climate change. We've done tremendous work making sure that we have voter-friendly election laws, making sure that we make unprecedented investments in schools and public services funded by more progressive taxation, making sure that we have laws and community intervention to stop gun violence. That's something I've spent a huge amount of my time and energy on, making sure that we make long overdue reforms in the justice system and also policing. And progress on so many other fronts. I look forward to questions on those particulars or any others. We have a lot of, as I mentioned, we have a lot more work to do. The housing work, again, the HSTPA does set a standard that will prevent us from losing units very rapidly, more rapidly over the course of many years than we were able to replace them through various programs. But we're looking to pass a bill I have called the Housing Access Voucher Program that would fund basically a new Section 8 style assistance program. I'm seeking to get that program started in the coming year and ratchet it up to about $1 billion a year is the goal, to house many thousands of people who are homeless. We have about 90,000 people who are homeless statewide at any given moment. It's an outrage, and I think it's an addressable problem. We had hearings just this week on lead poisoning, which is still a scourge throughout the state. It's actually much worse upstate than it is in New York, but we know it's bad all over. And again, it's the most preventable environmental problem we have, and it's very toxic and can and will be addressed. That's part of a larger effort to make sure our code enforcement systems work and housing quality is enhanced. We've got a lot more work to do on the preventing eviction, good cause eviction, and other laws to make sure that we have adequate tools in place to prevent people from getting evicted beyond the moratorium that is in place as an emergency measure during COVID. I know that, I expect there will be many questions. So I think I will, I'll stop soon. But just to again to say, I've been serving for 15 years, 4 years in the Senate. And I'm very proud of the work we've done, and I'm very proud to partner with so many of you in this work, in both protecting people locally and also really participating in ensuring that New York State lives up to the progressive values of our community and really what I think are the core needs of many people throughout the state, even though sometimes we differ on the particulars. We're at a moment where faith in government is at a very low point. We're at a moment when we can't rely on the federal government to deliver on a lot of promises because of the dynamics in other states. Our congressional litigation have done a great job of championing many things. But at the end of the day, at this moment in our time, the effectiveness of our state government is the most critical level of government that we need to make sure is effective, because we have the power to make these transformative changes. And again, I think that my position of leadership and my experience and my demonstrated track record of actually passing profoundly important legislation makes me best suited among the candidates in this race to continue to serve this community. So thank you very much for listening and for everybody for being here. And I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Senator Kavanagh. We're going to turn now to questions, and we're going to just remind everyone to please try and keep them short. And we're going to prioritize our CoDA members first. And, we're very happy to have many of our friends and neighbors here, and then we'll move it on to them. So, and please try and use the raise your hand function at the bottom. There's a toolbar where you can raise your hand. Any questions?
I guess we covered it all. I can keep talking for 20 more minutes, but I'm sure that would
Okay,
be fun.
I see the questions coming in. So
Right.
Cheryl Freeman, please be recognized. Please unmute yourself as well. Okay, Cheryl's having some trouble, I think. So I'll go ahead with Joyce Ravitz.
Hi, Joyce.
Joyce, you're also muted too.
Yes, okay, I
Okay.
got it. You talked a lot of what the Senate is doing, but not on what your positions on what they're doing is. And I would like to hear more on your positions on the things that you said that we're working on, because I'm assuming that you have ideas about what you want to do. I also specifically would like to know about your housing bills. And
So that's, I appreciate that. It's a broad question. The housing, are there other particular topics on the other areas you want to hear about? I mean, obviously I could sort of rattle off some, but.
I'm not interested in what the Senate is going to do. I want to know your ideas about what the Senate is going to do.
Okay, again, and my ideas are very substantially the Senate's ideas, especially in housing, because I lead the process of defining our housing agenda. So since you mentioned, I'll specifically talk about that. We need to do good cause eviction. We introduced it in 2019. We tried to get it done as part of the HSTPA. We did not achieve that, but good cause eviction, for people who don't know, is the notion that you can't evict somebody for no reason. You need a good cause, a reason. That is true in lots of our housing already. It's true in public housing. It's true in rent stabilized housing. It's true in Section 8 and other funded housing. It is not true in the open housing market, which affects about half of the tenants in New York State and basically almost all the tenants upstate. And basically it says, you have to allow somebody to continue their tenancy, renew their lease if they have a lease, and unless you have a good cause. Good cause is an inability to pay rent. Although, as I mentioned, we have other ways of addressing people who can't pay their rent. It also would mean it would mean a limit on excessive rent increases. You couldn't be evicted for failing to pay an unreasonable rent increase. You could be evicted if you're causing an extreme nuisance to your neighbors or using the apartment for criminal activity or those other things. That really would be transformative. It would give basic rights to live in our communities and our homes that people haven't had for generations. I mentioned HAVP, which again is a bill I wrote along with lots of advocates, which will create a giant program to ensure that we are subsidizing people's rent and making it affordable. Currently, a quarter of all renters in the state pay more than 50% of their income in rent. That is unconscionable. This is a program that would take $1 billion when fully implemented, and it would use that money to make sure that tenants across the state are not homeless, not facing a risk of eviction, and are not spending more than 30% of whatever their income have on rent. Again, it would be huge and transformative. I've got a bill in housing to require that all buildings that are built after 2024 be all electric, unless it is absolutely infeasible to do that, unless you need, gas in some particular circumstance somewhere in the state. We expect that very few buildings will be found to be unfeasible because all the technology is there. We've got a lot of what we need to do is through the budget. We need to greatly enhance funding for public housing. I have passed a bill that requires the state to put forth a 5-year capital plan. It is now on the current governor's desk to be signed or vetoed. But in any case, we are at the beginning of a new 5-year plan. We need to make sure that that plan is funding what is sometimes called social housing these days, making sure there's housing where tenants and residents have significant control over their housing, making sure we're just funding much greater resources. I mentioned, code enforcement and, getting lead and other toxins out of houses. Again, that's a bill that I am working on and introducing, and we already had a 7-hour hearing on it the other day. In other areas, I mean, again, I mentioned I favor a dramatic increase in the funding for the excluded worker fund. It's depleted because there was so much need. We need to do more. Again, I don't want to. I don't want to. We're trying to keep the questions and the answers short. I assume you're.
Yes, please. I would be
about other
appreciated. We
things
have
I
lots
favor,
of
but
questions.
Joyce, why don't we, if I may, why don't we, if I assume other people ask me about specific issues, I'm happy to talk, but I think.
Okay, okay,
Is that good?
thank you.
Thank you both.
Okay.
I'd like to recognize Cheryl again, if she can unmute. If there's some issues, maybe you can write it in the chat and we'll have someone else relay it. Is Cheryl there?
Hello, hello.
Hi, Tito. Are you with Cheryl, or I'll put you on the stack, but. Okay, all right. So I still can't reach Cheryl. Olympia, please go ahead.
Thank you. I have many questions, so I'll ask the first, and if we have time, I can ask the other ones. So around education, because you didn't answer the questionnaire, so I would love to know both your position, of course, on desegregation in gifted and talented, and more specifically about the bill that is currently in the state around childcare, but also universal after school. That is a major issue that contributes to segregation of schools in our district also specifically. So what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, and on the questionnaire, we will get the questionnaire in. We got it, I think, Tuesday, and I had a 7-hour hearing on lead, and I spent the last 2 days in the Senate. We call it the retreat, but it's basically a 10-hour-a-day policy conference to discuss, the state of everything and what we need to do for the next session. So we will get it in, but I did review it, and I'm aware of the questions. I support fully funding childcare throughout the state. I joined my colleague Jabari Brisport he is the chair of our committee on children and families, and he has done a statewide effort to solicit input on how to do that. I appeared on both his Brooklyn and Manhattan versions of his forum. I appeared with him briefly at one of our sites in the district as part of its fact-finding tour. And I think it's really critical that we get that done. It is one of the things that we as a society have failed to do in sort of poor comparison to most other civilized, well-funded democracies. We took big steps forward in fully funding the schools themselves. It's long overdue, but we finally put in place through some progressive taxation program that will fully fund the schools, will fully fund what's called the foundation aid formula, which is basically the basic calculation of what our schools need. We also, with all of these things, home care, I would add, as well as childcare, we do need to make sure we are adequately paying the workers who do this work. All of these programs are grossly underfunded because we depended on people's willingness to do the work. So childcare workers and home care workers do this very labor-intensive work and are underpaid, which is one of the things that makes it hard to do those programs. So Senator May and others have been pushing bills to increase those, and I strongly support them. I think that.
I mean, the foundation aid is last year's news, so for this year we need new.
Well, again, it's foundation aid. What we did last year phases in the increase over the next 2 years, so we will see another big jump in the budget. And again, supporting progressive taxation to do the things we need to do is a core work. And again, we're doing it on an ongoing basis. We're going into a next budget cycle. We need to address the things. I don't want to say I'm going to put X dollars into schools because I want to make sure that, again, we're looking for an estimate now of how much more we need for the excluded worker fund, which again, I would just note is an entirely state funded $2 billion program. No state in the country. California did something similar, but it was in the order of tens of millions of dollars. So we have been moving big money into critical priorities. And I think New York City actually has done much better. We did pre-K for all. We're now trying to do it down to 3-year-olds and then do even early childhood care. There are many parts of the state that don't have kindergarten in their jurisdictions. So we do need to do it on a statewide basis. But I am fully committed to fully funding these things. And again, childcare is critical for people's being able to afford their housing, being able to go to the jobs they need to do, and making sure kids all get a fair start in life. So I'm very, very supportive of it.
Thank you. We only have a couple minutes left. So I saw Cheryl was able to unmute. Cheryl, can you ask your question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, my question is, it all sounds good about the funding that's, Senator Kavanagh is bringing to the community, but my question is, by you bringing all this funding and not monitoring it, me living in a Section 8 building, and there's nobody monitoring the landlords or management for the tenants on the tenant's behalf. How can you reassure me as a Section 8 tenant, if you re-elected into office, that you would look more deeper into the Section 8 program and give more information to the Section 8 tenants, especially on the EIV program and what that's all about?
Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you for it. We do try to intervene when we believe that management is not doing what it's supposed to do. And, we're working on, I'm not sure, where do you live?
10 Stanton Street.
Okay, all right, I know it well.
Yeah, okay.
So we need to make sure that the Section 8 funded buildings like that one, it's a project-based Section 8, meaning the Section 8 was actually the funding that created the building. It's supposed to.
Yes, and the tenant's been maintaining it.
Yeah, they're overseen sometimes directly by HUD, sometimes directly by city agencies. I think there are a few overseen by the state agency, but we will intervene. I have had some conversations with folks in Section 8 about some of the issues there, but we can intervene and address that. We have had other situations where we've gone in and
It'd be nice to reach out to us Section 8 tenants.
I will reach out to you, Monday morning, and we'll try to work on those issues. And we do have, a lot of it is making the executive agencies do their job, but we have good track record of making sure that happens. So let's talk about what we can do to address your issues there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Elena Acosta is a co-host, but she would like to ask a question. So she wasn't able to raise her hand. Elena?
Hi, hello. I just wanted to ask a question that you have mentioned in the past, that you have priorities on justice and that we're suffering from low faith in the government. So I wanted to know, how do you support making it easier for victims to get justice by removing the barriers of qualified immunity when public officials violate the constitutional rights of New Yorkers? Also, will you be pledging to co-sponsor the bill to end qualified immunity today?
So we've done just the general version and then get to qualified immunity. We've done an enormous amount in the last couple of years on criminal justice reform and on policing, repeal of 50A and many other many other reforms in the way we do policing. I'm cognizant I'm trying to do this shorthand. And we also, bail reform and reform to solitary confinement and so many other things. On qualified immunity, I do believe we have several bills to do that. I do believe the problem, like in theory, the notion that if you're acting in your official capacity, there should be something different than if you're just an ordinary citizen walking down the street. But qualified immunity has been abused and the courts have interpreted very badly. And I think we should address that. Senator Jackson has a bill and there's another bill as well, I think by Senator Myrie. I do support doing something about that. Whether we do a flat repeal as those bills propose is something I'd still like to have conversations with my colleagues about.
Thank you.
He raised his hand early on. I'm going to recognize him.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. So my understanding is that you did not support just cause eviction. Am I mistaken in that?
You're totally 100% mistaken. I signed the bill when it was introduced by Senator Salazar, and I, as the chair of the Housing Committee, even though the bill is pending in the Judiciary Committee, spent an enormous amount of time in 2019 trying to negotiate an agreement with the Assembly and the Governor's Office to get that bill done. It has not happened. It is one of the big, missing pieces of what we did in 2019. As I mentioned, we tried to substitute a lot of other things because we couldn't get that done. Like that did dramatically reduce evictions across the state, but we need to keep at it. It is a top priority of mine. I've spent, lots of time, in fact, spent a lot of time talking about it yesterday with the Democratic Conference of the Senate at our retreat, leading the discussion on how to get that done. I am very, very strongly committed to that. I don't know where the idea that I don't support it would have come from, but it's just categorically false.
Thank you. What about public banking? Do you support public banking?
Yes, I have a bill actually that would create a public infrastructure bank that I've been working on. I've been recently talking with some of our incoming city elected officials about how it might be useful for some of their plans. But yeah, I think we should. I've also supported, we have our local credit unions. I've also been a big supporter of them. They get kind of disadvantaged in various programs because the banking lobby disadvantages them. But yes, I support making sure we have public banking, making sure generally the public sector is doing what it can. One of the reasons I was mentioning infrastructure is one of the things we need to do is build out lots of infrastructure to address climate change. And I think we need to create new funding mechanisms for that. So I think it's particularly important there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have 30 seconds left. Paul, if you would like to ask your question very shortly.
Sure. Thanks, Brian. So quickly on the climate, you supported the Climate and Community Protection Act, which was passed, and we have pending the Climate and Community Investment Act. But there's going to be a lot of aspects to that. One is to get it passed and get it on the floor. But the other is the International Panel of Climate Change and the International Panel on Biodiversity met and felt that we should not be doing, came out very strongly, we should not mitigate climate at this expense of biodiversity or biodiversity at the expense of climate. Yet we do have that contradiction on the East River Park. And there is a flawed process. And then we also have the problem with the Con Ed plant. I've yet to hear a plan on how that's going to be dealt with on the fossil fuels.
Okay.
Thank you. We're past time, so just keep it very short.
That's a big question for 30 seconds, but I'll give it a shot. I pushed for and got a hearing on the Climate Investment Act with the Energy and Encon Committee and participated in it. I've been pushing for it. I'm a sponsor of it. The time we're going to do large scale spending is probably the budget process. So that process begins with the governor's executive budget, which is due January 18th, happens to be my birthday. But I am pushing for large scale funding on that. In addition to, programs like ending, fossil fuels in all new buildings constructed that I mentioned and other things. On the East River Park project, I participated in that process from the beginning when it was a community-driven process. Was very happy to see the first round, the first proposal that came out of that process. Was blindsided like many people when the city announced that was totally unfeasible. They needed to do something totally different, and then announced that totally different thing is the only thing feasible. I maintained at the time that it required alienation, which would have given state legislators a say. I got, Senator Hoylman and I and Senator Epstein and Senator New testified to that effect. But there have been lawsuits that have determined that it is entirely a city matter. And for better or for worse, that program has been supported by community boards and your local council members and, ultimately the administration. I think would have done it quite differently. I think the thing is too destructive and too intrusive. And, but I also respect the fact that Carlina and others negotiated some significant changes to that, including phasing the construction, so parts of the park will be available all the time. But I don't think, it is my assessment that we probably did not need to do something nearly so destructive of the park to achieve climate change. And I urged the administration repeatedly to do something different, but I couldn't get that done. And if the courts were to rule, or they do rule on appeal, that it requires alienation, we'll be back to the drawing board. But otherwise, it really is in the hands of your city officials.
Thank you, Senator Kavanagh. Our time is over, so I'm gonna thank you for your time. I would encourage you, if you could fill out the questionnaire. I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll get you. I apologize, I didn't get it. I got in after last night from lots of days and all.
Yeah,
you know,
we sent it last
I
week,
see-
but I understand it, things get busy.
Yeah, I have a few, do one more thing. I have a few more, I see a few more questions, Joyce and others. If you want to call me, I'm happy to follow up.
Yeah, put your number in the chat so people can call you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so I'm gonna let in our next candidate, and thank you, Brian. And if anyone, a quick reminder, if anyone from Senator Kavanagh's campaign is here, we ask that you please leave, and the same with all the rest of the candidates.
I assume you want candidates, you want me to leave as well.
Yes.
That's okay, great. I didn't want to jump prematurely. Thank you all. Good luck. And I should acknowledge my opponents in this race. Welcome to the race, and I look forward to hearing from you in some other forum. But thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Okay. Again, quick reminder of housekeeping. Well, we're keeping asking the candidates to speak for up to 10 minutes. If they would like to waive some time for more question and answers, that's great as well. We're going to be asking all people asking questions to keep it to less than 30 seconds so we can get through as many questions as possible. I see Vittoria Fariello is here, and I'm sorry if I said your name wrong.
That was great.
Okay, yes, welcome. Thank you for making the time to speak with us. I'll hand the floor over to you.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. So my name is Vittoria Fariello. It's Vittoria with 2 T's, no C. I'm a district leader downtown and in the Lower East Side, and I'm running for state senate here in District 26. I'm running on affordable housing, healthcare for all, and against the corruption in our system. I have lived in our district for over 20 years. I'm also a mom, an immigrant, and a lawyer. I've been fortunate enough to be in public service for 25 years. Like so many of you, so many people certainly, the 2016 presidential election terrified me. It terrified me because of what it said about where we were as a country, or where we are as a country, and where we're going, and what kind of a world we would be leaving our children. But rather than despair, I was moved to do something. And I first organized with other lawyers with a group called Lawyers for Good Governance, and to help provide immigrants with legal representation in the early stages of the Trump administration. During that time, a friend of mine, Carolyn Lasco, reached out and asked if I wanted to run for district leader. And I said, yes, what's that? But I realized that it was a way for me to connect with the community and to be politically active. So I jumped at the opportunity. That was in the spring of 2017. That summer, our current state senator was selected by the party machine, despite the fact that the county committee members voted overwhelmingly for his opponent. And that infuriated me. So I organized with other district leaders to change the rules. I was appointed to the rules committee by our district, and I was the leading voice to push for change. We did change the rules, so this can no longer happen. Now a vote by the county committee members is binding on the county leader. This experience reminded me of my work in anti-corruption. My first full-time legal job was a paralegal in an anti-corruption unit, and we investigated the mafia and white-collar crime. And we even had an election fraud case. When I was in law school, I worked with an Italian magistrate that was investigating Berlusconi. Berlusconi is basically the Trump of Italy, who at the time, Berlusconi was funneling money through Switzerland to pay off judges in Rome. As a lawyer, I worked as an investigative attorney in the Department of Investigations for the city. And we investigated corruption both within the Department of Buildings, as well as with developers and others who were doing business through the Department of Buildings. Unfortunately, we see many forms of corruption in our own city, such as the mismanagement of NYCHA, and where the lack of transparency allows the city to ignore the community. I believe that my connection with our communities makes me well suited to be our state senator as well. As I said in the beginning, I've lived in the community for over 20 years. I'm raising 4 children here. We run our own business downtown. We were here for September 11th, for Superstorm Sandy, for COVID, and we never left. We've always been here. As a district leader, for the past 4 years, I've been working with community leaders to put a spotlight on corruption, such as what happened in the county committee. And some of you may also remember last year, if you're county committee members, in 2019, I had to sue the county committee because they didn't want the incoming county committee to vote. They were basically trying to disenfranchise the county committee. And so I sued and we won, and we were able to vote for our own leadership. I want to amplify our voices, as I have already. So I've testified on behalf of our communities before community boards and the city council. I've testified, for example, for Soho NoHo rezoning hearings. I've testified against Howard Hughes, who is insisting on drilling in a toxic site where it's next to 2 schools, while those schools are in session, while our children are there and would be breathing the air that they would be digging up from the site. I'm also spearheading the fight for 100% affordable 5 World Trade Center, which is the last site to be designated as a World Trade Center. It is public land and it's being funded with public money. And we desperately need affordable housing downtown. And we need this to be 100% affordable. And with the right leadership, we can make this happen. So I'm running because I am tired of politicians and developers using our communities like a Lego land, just building and knocking down with complete disregard to the fact that there are communities that live here, as if we don't exist. I'm so tired of us being ignored. Our communities, our voices, our ideas, our energies are our greatest asset. We work hard to point out problems and offer solutions that are then scrapped and disregarded. I'm sick of the disrespect shown to the hard work and the dedication put into our proposals, only to be used to check off a box of public participation. I will work hard to bring transparency and accessibility to our district, and I will amplify our voices in Albany. It is my connection with the community leaders and the support that they have given me, as well as my experience in anti-corruption and my records of successfully bringing change that will make me a successful senator. I will work hard to bring affordable housing to our district, to bring healthcare for all New Yorkers, and to fight against corruption in our system. I'm here today to ask for your endorsement and for your votes for this primary. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Vittoria. Again, just a quick reminder, we'll be answering questions first from our CoDA members, and we're very happy to have the rest of our neighbors and friends from other clubs and around the district to be here, but we'll answer their questions thereafter. And if you could please raise your hand using the raise hand function at the bottom of the toolbar, and keep your questions short. I see Denny Salas has his hand raised. I'll recognize him first. If you could please unmute.
Thank you. Hi, Victoria.
Hey, Denny.
With Roe versus, how you doing? With Roe versus Wade potentially and likely being overturned, what bills or ideas would you lead on to make New York State a safe haven for women who may travel here for healthcare?
Yeah, that's a really important question, because obviously that is not something that we can stand. And we have, and I'm actually not entirely familiar with the bills that are currently, if there are any bills that are currently in the Senate, but I would support any kind of protection that we can offer. I mean, we have to be a safe haven for women. We need to have the right to abortion without question. But I'd look into them, and if you know them, Denny, please send them along, because I'd love to look into them, and I'm absolutely put my support behind it. Thanks.
Thank you. Aura Olavaria, if you could please unmute. Aura, you're still muted.
You hear me now?
Yep, we got you.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, there was a question on the questionnaire. What types of people or campaigns would you not receive contributions from? And you said, I will not take money from unethical sources. What are those unethical sources?
So they would be large developers and people who completely disregard the community. Certainly anyone whose interest would be contrary to the interests of the people. I struggled with that question because in my work with 5 World Trade Center, one of the things we're doing is we're putting together proposals for how we can make it 100% affordable because somehow we have to show them that it's feasible. So there are lots of different organizations, and there are actually some developers that specialize in affordable housing. And so I wanted to show, like, if somebody is going, if it's a organization or a person whose interests are contrary to that of the public, then I wouldn't take their money.
Thank you. Deborah Scott Gonzalez. If you could please unmute.
Good afternoon, everyone. I also live in Section 8 building on the Lower East Side. And Victoria, I heard you say there's a lot of mismanagement within NYCHA. And I understand that, and we can understand that also by living in the Section 8 building. But the bad behavior that we have dealing with these landlords, what can you help us do when these landlords are getting away with things that we need to be done, like EIV, like repairs, like anything like that, because everything is directed right now with NYCHA, and we understand that NYCHA does need more help. But when these private owners are getting money from the government and not doing their job, how can we change management?
Yeah, no, and thank you. That's a great question. And it's a very real question, because I've heard this from a number of people who are in Section 8 housing, that that the landlords are not responsive because they're basically getting paid and there's no recourse. So we have to look at the laws that are there and see how the program is implemented, and seeing that, if there are mechanisms that we can put in where money can be withheld from the landlords if they don't provide the services that are necessary. That's one idea I have, but there's many, and certainly, I think having the tenants have a voice in what's going on is incredibly important too. We, like you said, and this is again something that, as we've been struggling with the 5 World Trade Center, is we were trying to figure out what are the programs that are good. And this was one of the issues with the Section 8 program is that if we have private actors, their motivations are profits.
Yes. Yes.
And that's a problem.
Yes. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to recognize a question that was from the chat from our assembly member. He says, can we hear your position on fixing public housing and the proposed blueprint?
Sure. So I have a general understanding of the blueprint. And again, my problem with the blueprint is that my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that it would be funded by, eventually there would be bonds that are sold to investors. And these investors, again, their goal is going to be to make money. So when that's the goal, it's no longer a public service. So the goal needs to be to serve the public. And so I have an issue with that, because it's again, we're going to be giving deference to groups that want to make money. And that really concerns me. So I like that they're trying to think in novel ways to fund NYCHA, but honestly, we should just be doing the work. NYCHA should be just doing the work.
Thank you.
Can I just, Andrea, could you?
Oh,
I just wanted to know what her plan is. If it's not that, what's her plan to fix NYCHA then?
Well, I'm expecting and hoping that the money will come in from the federal government, and to make sure I would have oversight and make sure that it's actually being used. I mean, I'm still learning some of these different things. As I said, I'm with the focus on 5 World Trade Center, so much new there's so much innovative stuff coming out now that I'd love to, it's very exciting to me. But right now, as it stands, I would want them I want to make sure that the money that comes from the federal government is actually used immediately for the repairs that are necessary now.
thank you. I will recognize Michael Farron, who's trying to raise his hand, but and then Pedro after Michael.
Actually, it's Donna, and we're
Hi,
on the
Donna.
same screen. So thank you. Don't know what my problem was. So Victoria, I have just a few questions. One initially is I hope in the future, as a district leader, you will become more engaged in your poll sites in your district, because we at the Board of Elections could really use your help in addressing the challenges we have on the Lower East Side and in Chinatown with recruitment for poll workers. And I think you know that we've been making that outreach to you and others in Lower Manhattan. But my question is about your business. So can you tell us a little bit about the business that you've owned, and what benefits and wages you provide for your workers, and how that fits into an economic justice platform that you would support?
Sure, absolutely. So just to address quickly the poll sites, I do go to all the poll sites that are in my part. And I actually understand I know I've been working with other district leaders to try to increase the number of poll workers, because it is a real problem. And I think we need to work with the department, with the Board of Elections rather, to if we could stagger some of the shifts, it would be so much easier. So just to put that aside, I am an attorney, and my husband and I have a law firm in Lower Manhattan. We do trials and investigations, and we do complex litigation. And our focus, we do business disputes, but we also focus on public service. So we've done Me Too cases. We've sued Harvey Weinstein. We've sued Bill O'Reilly. We've done consumer fraud. We've done racketeering. We have actually a case going to trial in February for human trafficking. So those are the kinds of things we do. In terms of our staff, we provide all the benefits we possibly can, which is certainly healthcare, obviously, overtime for our staff when they do beyond their 7.5 hours. What I think really helps with this is that I really understand the struggle that small businesses, one of the things I've done during the pandemic, even before the pandemic, but during the pandemic in particular, was try to help small businesses such as restaurants or like bookstores and whatnot, and trying to get them the programs that could help assist them, whether it's for rent or it's to get proper licensing for whatever they needed. So I think being an employer really, it's really tough. It's really hard. And there's nothing, that's one of the reasons actually why healthcare for all is so important to me. I mean, to me, it's because I just don't understand how a society could possibly not provide healthcare. I mean, I just don't understand that. And it's popular, everybody wants it, and we just need the politicians to push it through, because we can get this done. It also is a huge burden on smaller businesses. I was speaking to a restaurant owner about 2 weeks ago, and he was trying to get together with other restaurant owners so they could pull together so they could get healthcare, like some sort of a group healthcare. And he just wasn't getting any traction because it was still too expensive. And it's expensive for it's just not, it would be a boon to the economy because these smaller businesses wouldn't have this burden. But we provide that. I mean, that's what we do in our we allow people to work from home if that's what they need. So we provide as much flexibility. We give, we have 2 weeks off a year that are the whole firm is off except for us lawyers, and then they get additional. I can't remember. I have to look it up, but I think it's either 2 or 3 weeks off for the year. So we try to be as generous as we possibly can.
Thank you. Pedro Lopez, please. Thank you.
So along that line, my question is, do you support the New York Health Act?
I do. I started to, I haven't read it all, but what I have read, I really like, and what I've seen. So I absolutely support it. Yep.
Thank you. Ben?
Hi, Vittoria. I thought your comments on the World Trade Center were very interesting. It's certainly an interesting project, and I obviously agree with the goal of producing a lot of affordable housing in Lower Manhattan. But I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about how that seems to contradict your position on the Soho NoHo rezoning and 250 Water Street and Haven Green, where, you know, over 1,000 affordable housing units would be produced from those projects. So, you know, when is it okay to, like, why do you oppose affordable housing there, but support affordable housing at 5 World Trade Center? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. And the answer is I do not oppose affordable housing anywhere. But what the propositions that were made or the plans that are out there are not about affordable housing. They are to actually increase the luxury buildings that are out there. And when you provide 75% luxury, it is not affordable for those 25% that are there. That community is no longer affordable. 5 World Trade Center is actually the perfect site for this because we can actually do 100% affordability. It is a resource-rich neighborhood. We have beautiful parks downtown. We have amazing schools. We're right on top of a transit hub. We're walks away from Wall Street jobs. We're walks away from government jobs. It's perfect. This is where it should be built. When we talk about affordability, we need to talk about volume. And also in the Soho NoHo in particular, it's not guaranteed.
I'd just like to say that in all the Soho, 250 Water, those both involve no government money, and 5 World Trade Center would involve, what, $1 billion in subsidy?
We've also provided billions of dollars to Silverstein and Brookfield to build all of World Trade Center. So I have no problem. Actually, that's where the government money should be going.
To supporting Silverstein?
To supporting affordable housing at 5 World Trade Center and other places.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. It's from Michelle Winfield. I'll read it out from the chat box. I attended the NYCHA agreement with the mayor and Dr. Carson. Resident engagement procedures were established as well of mandates for repairs. The problem has been and is still fraud. The workers have been certifying, they have completed work. Example, removable of lead, which was painted over and never removed. The families have been exposed to lead poisoning since 2013. This is outrageous. What can be done?
Well, certainly there's oversight needs to be done, right? This is exactly what I did when I was, one of the many things I did when I was at the Department of Investigation was look into licensed trade workers and those who would sign off on jobs that actually were not done. So we need to be, greater oversight is one step towards it for sure. And I think, again, we need the funding to provide the number of workers that we need to actually address these issues.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge that was from our state committee woman, Michelle Winfield. Thanks. Joyce?
The last questioner mentioned Haven Green. Do you support the low-income housing, the senior gay-friendly housing at Haven Green?
Haven Green, this is the one at Elizabeth Street Garden?
Yeah, well, you calling it Elizabeth Street Garden says what you think.
Well, I absolutely support having housing, both LGBTQ communities as well as our senior citizens. I think we should not be pitting our gardens or our green spaces against housing. We have, there's 388 Hudson Street that it could be built. It could provide 5 times as much housing, and we don't have to get rid of. We're starved for green in our city. We need to keep the green we have, and we have space, and we need to use that space for affordable housing.
I have answers to that, but I don't want to take the time. But you should look more into the proposal. It has green for the community, and it has low-income housing. And I agree that there should be low-income housing on the west side also, but there should be more low-income housing. It's not one or the other. You can't bring up housing someplace, low-income housing someplace, and say that should be instead of the low-income housing where.
Right. I'm going to limit questions.
So
Please go ahead, Vittoria.
So I think we can do this. We can do both. We can have the space and we can have affordable housing. It's a win-win situation if we use the spaces that we have.
Thank you. Mike, please go ahead. Please.
Yep. Hi, Victoria. You'll remember we spent some time on the phone together and I've discussed disability rights issues with you, I think at length. Yet in the questionnaire, and I thank CoDA for a couple of questions that are inclusive of the disability community. But you were very brief in your response to those questions. Need elevators, IEP students. I don't understand what you mean by create and fund schools that specialize in teaching students with IEP, because what we really need is improvement to the existing system. I think maybe you're referring to contract schools. I don't know, but let's leave those answers aside and maybe you can flesh out for me a little bit about your policies with regard to disability rights and disability issues.
Well, hi, and thank you for the question. As you know, it matters to me that we have accessibility for people with disability. It matters quite a bit. And I think we can do this. We can do, I'm sorry, I don't have the questionnaire up in front of me, but I believe you're referring to, this is the question for bike lanes and I'm sorry. So we need to be building and we need an infrastructure that allows and gives access to everybody. That includes people with disabilities. Just to answer your question about schools, this is really important to me. So we have children who have different ways of learning. And we're currently looking at building a school that would specialize in certain different types of learning. And I think that's incredibly important because not every child will sit in the classroom and be able to learn the way that they teach everyone. So if your child is dyslexic, if your child has ADHD, if your child has some other form of some other way of learning, we need to provide spaces for that, and we have the ability to do that. We can actually build schools where the instruction is geared towards children with these types of learning patterns, and I think it's important that we do that. But Mike, I feel like I'm not answering your question.
What I said was, other than those two questions that you did provide a partial answer to, would you tell us more about your position on disability rights and other disability issues?
Yes, well, and I want to thank you for our conversation that we had. As you know, I'm working with a lot of businesses, particularly in Chinatown, that have been sued over ADA compliance. And I really appreciate your help with that and your collaboration with that. And I really hear what you're saying about not creating, not stepping into or not violating.
15 seconds, please. Sorry.
Sorry, no worries.
But we're over time.
In any case, so I don't want, giving a grace period is not something that I understand that you want, and I understand that completely, so I support that.
Thank you, and thank you for your time today, Victoria. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. I'll put my info in the chat. Is that okay?
That would be fantastic. Yes.
Awesome.
If any of our members have questions for you, I'm sure they'd be happy to reach out. I'm going to pass the mic to my co-president, Josh, who will be handling the next couple of candidates.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for these great questions so far, and thank you to the candidates. I'd just like to repeat what Andrea has been saying. Thank you for your time, Vittoria, and for the senator earlier. If we could ask you to leave at this point, I think she just did, so that's perfect. Our next candidate I see here, Illapa, there you are. And if just a reminder to everyone of the format, Illapa will be able to speak for 10 minutes, and then we'll do a 15-minute Q&A where we'll prioritize folks who haven't had the chance to speak yet and CoDA members. So if you're ready, we'll put 10 minutes on the timer and take it away, Illapa. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Illapa Sairitupac, proud organizer here in Lower Manhattan. I'm a social worker, democratic socialist, and a low-income renter here who understands that the system wasn't made for me or people like me in our ever-changing district. My parents came to this country in the 80s in search of economic opportunity. They had trouble surviving economically in their home country and they decided to move to the United States. When they got here, my mom was cleaning houses, my dad was a busboy at a restaurant. Later on, they went to community college, and now my mother is a nurse and my father is a teacher. Growing up, moved around a lot to different towns to survive, but the communities that we found in each place were crucial for us, no matter how small. Years later, I moved to Manhattan, where I worked as a dog walker, making starvation wages. Being on food stamps helped me to survive. For years, I've lived in an apartment building with mainly Fujianese immigrants who make a living by being delivery workers. I see them come home from their jobs every night, completely exhausted. And in the years I've lived in this building, we've gotten to know each other, and I feel fortunate to live in a working class community such as this. Lower Manhattan is the bastion of political organizing in this country. Historically, our immigrants arrived here, they settled here, and they advocated for their rights here through social movements, whether it be the labor movement in the early century or others that inform the character of our country. This is a part of our history down here, and it's important that our political candidates keep this movement going. I am primarily known as an organizer in the climate movement down here who advocates for a Green New Deal and a reality where New York State is free from fossil fuel infrastructure. This infrastructure that is poisoning our people every day. Even the Con Edison power plant up on 14th Street poses a danger to us. Only a few years ago, there were explosions there in that power plant with flames over 60-foot high. Had this power plant burnt down, it could have easily spread fire and harmed the Lower East Side and other communities down here. In Brooklyn, I proudly organized against North Brooklyn Pipeline, and I've been a part of this fight for years now. This is a pipeline that originates in Brownsville, goes through Williamsburg, and terminates in Greenpoint. This pipeline goes through and under Black and brown neighborhoods because to National Grid, these communities are expendable. In addition to my climate organizing, I'm a proud parole justice organizer. I've organized with Release Aging People for Prison campaign for a few years now. And I also did a unit of chaplaincy in a hospital where I would often be called to visit the prison floor. And I would see young men who looked like me in prison simply because they did not get the proper mental health care that they deserved and because they had slipped through the cracks. My experiences there further bolstered my decarceral commitment. And now I'm a social worker. I talk to members of my community every day. I see their struggles and I help my neighbors navigate through poverty, addiction, and mental health. This to me is not only work rooted in compassion and solidarity, but it is a job that fights for justice and against a system which working class folks are forgotten and left to fend for themselves. I am ready to take this commitment to Albany because the only way to make change is when working class people fight against the powerful interests that are fighting against them and their representatives. I'm going to be very honest and frank with y'all. I'm not a person who's worked in politics or has long ambitions to run for office. I am not an insidery person. I don't come from this world. And I believe this can also be a strength. And this can keep me accountable to people like my folks in my building, just ordinary people who are fighting to survive in a system that has failed them. As a senator, I would fight to pass good cause, the Build Public Renewables Act, the Fair and Timely Parole Act, the Elder Parole Act, the Sweat Bill, and many others that are common sense legislation that would immediately alleviate the suffering of so many. I believe the time is now for change in our community. I believe our current representative has not been, fighting for us in a way that is palpable. And I think that the time is now for an organizer and someone who's been a part of this movement to be representing his community. And I want to thank CoDA so much for giving me the opportunity to present today. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Yapa. So we will move right along to the Q&A here. Sean, let's say like 20 minutes since you waived the last 5 there. Perfect. And I'll just go right ahead. Denny, go ahead, please.
With a federal funding ban to support the development of new public housing, unless we get a supermajority in both houses of Congress, which is kind of unlikely, and with New York City having an affordable housing shortfall of nearly 800,000 units, do you support rezonings like Soho NoHo that uses subsidies to fund the development of affordable homes?
I believe that Soho NoHo are wealthy neighborhoods and that we should have more affordable housing. I also believe that we must protect tenants from any displacement. I would sponsor and co-sponsor protections against displacement, like right to remain, good cause, and right to return legislation.
Thank you, Yapa. I'd just like to refer people quickly. You'll see in the chat, we have, Jake just put it there again. We received a very thorough questionnaire response, and we do appreciate that. But if anyone has further questions, we'd love to take them here while we have the candidate in our presence. Mike, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Hi, we were not 5 feet from one another at the NIPAN event. I stood proudly in front of this same, pardon?
Yeah, good to see you.
But good to see you. But, I stood in front of this same banner a few feet away from you, and we didn't have the opportunity to talk. Again, I thank CoDA for a couple of inclusive questions, but you did not direct any, none of your answers were inclusive of people with disabilities, who, after all, are the largest minority, the poorest minority, and in my view, the most discriminated against minority. So there was ample opportunity in almost all the questions to include people with disabilities. I look for that all the time, of course, that's what I do. But I didn't hear it from you, so I'm asking you now, please let me know what your views are on disability rights and disability issues.
Completely, and thank you for holding me accountable for that. I think that, as you know, I think the disabled are probably the most invisible here in our community, and I would definitely advocate for, buildings and issues that will really support, disabled. I know that in this country we're way behind, and you would think this city we would have much more building friendly and disabled person accessible infrastructure. And I think it's a shame that we're behind on this. And I would definitely fight for the issues that really affect you. And I have two people in my family, and I understand that this is a real lifelong struggle to do things that others can do very easily, and it's not okay that we haven't invested as hard as we can. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer. And Tito, I see you there. We'll put you on the stack. I have our district leader Alra next, and then our district leader John Blasco, and then we'll get to you, Tito. Alra, go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Aura. I am a district leader. Thanks so much, Josh, for introducing me. I'm also born and raised here on the Lower East Side. I live on 6th Street and Avenue D, and I was here during Sandy. So it's really concerning to me that you're against the plan that would provide some protection for us, specifically because the small group of people that are against the plan are mostly white, and I think only one lives in public housing that I know of. Are you concerned at all that your viewpoint doesn't really include people of color?
Thank you for your question. I think that when the Big U was shut down years ago, I think that was a real shame, and everyone was very upset about that. I think that I still believe that building a berm between the park and the housing is important, and this was Big U envisioned. ESCR right now prioritizes level of service on the FDR over the needs of our current residents, and we must consider options that aren't grounded in Robert Moses' outdated extractive car culture. And I'm very willing to talk to you and other people like you who are on the front lines here. And I think it's super important to always be having these conversations. Unfortunately, I think this is always going to be an issue that we're going to have to fight against. And the Build Public Renewables Act, which is a bill that we can pass starting next year if we fight for it, will also resolve and protect us from more flooding.
I just am really concerned that the viewpoint doesn't include people of color, and it's imposing that view on a very marginalized group of people, and it's the pockets of poverty that are not being represented in that viewpoint. It's the idea that they know better because they have a better view, or I don't understand. Why is it okay to continue to think that your viewpoint is more important when you're not including the people who are being affected by it directly? Like, I went in people's homes during Sandy. They lost everything on the first and second floor. I don't understand. Also, you talked about school funding, and there's nothing about social workers there. So that concerns me too. But thank you for coming.
Yep, if you have a response to any of that, go right ahead. Otherwise, we can.
I know that 2,000 people from Nashville signed the petition against Esker, so I do think that I also don't want to erase the POC that are involved in this fight. Yes, I do sense it is, majority white people that are doing this right now, but I would never be a part of a fight that felt that it was ignoring the voices of the working class. And I thank you, Aura, for your comments. Thank you so much for decent. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I see John has passed on his question. I have Tito next in the stack. Tito, can you unmute yourself, please?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I'm losing my voice. I apologize. I appreciate you coming on and spending your time here. I do like the fact that you're a socialist social worker. I'm married to one. And I really do feel you. However, I think that you need to speak more to the people on the ground about issues, because there are some issues that I don't think you're fully developed in. The one thing I do want to say is that, piggybacking on Mike's statement, is not only providing housing for the disabled community, but as you know, or we should know, work is the most important thing to a human being. It's what makes you who you are. And unfortunately, like Mike stated, there's not important opportunity for the disabled. And I would like to get a commitment from you, if you win, that you will push for a bill that will provide employment for the disabled community.
Completely. I think that capitalism has particularly targeted disabled people, even to the point of defining them as anyone who cannot be exploited for their labor. And I believe in full accessibility and disability justice, which in my mind ties directly to a socialist framework. And I believe that the disabled deserve to prosper and to work where they want to work. And I believe that these rights are super important, and that we as New York must be leaders in this fight, so that other cities and other states can see what we're doing and see our paradigm and echo and follow our movement down here. Thank you.
Thank you, Tito, for that question. Next is District Leader Paul Newell, who in the interest of transparency is the unpaid treasurer, I believe, for another candidate in this race, Vittoria. Paul, if you could just clarify that relationship. You're not a paid employee, and then go ahead and ask your question for the candidate.
That was accurately clarified. I'm her treasurer and a supporter and her co-district leader. My question is for Yaba, just because I just did want to clarify, and it's not a gotcha in any way. You talked about your work on decarceration. I just want to clarify, where do you stand on the new jail in Chinatown?
I'm very much against this new jail. I've spent a lot of time flyering and being on the streets and talking to people and tabling against this new jail. And I think the last thing we need is a new jail down here. As a social worker, I could never support a new jail. As a person who has clients and patients who have been overly incarcerated because they look a certain way and not given the benefit of the doubt because they came from a certain socioeconomic class and because maybe they weren't seen as valuable and they were thrown away and discarded, I could never support a new jail down here. And as a social worker, we must come together and really find alternatives to just throwing guns at people and answering a lot of these problems with just punitive solutions, which are not solutions at all. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize a question from the chat from our Assembly member, Harvey Epstein. How do we fully support public housing? It sounds like you support the Preservation Trust and Bonding Authority for NYCHA.
Sorry, I'm having trouble unmuting. In regards to that, I think that is this the blueprint? Is that what we're talking about? I think the federal funding is not enough. I think we need 70 billion, and the current blueprint offers maybe 30 to 40 billion. And we need to find additional funding to do the backlog. And I would like for us to fight for a real Green New Deal for public housing and for NYCHA and NORAD.
Thank you. Marielle Martinet, please unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you, Illapa, for being here tonight. My question follows up on something that Auda said in terms of, kids right now are having, they're dealing with a lot of trauma. There's a lot of mental health issues that aren't being addressed. So, I know you have some social work experience. Could you just speak more about how, what is your experience in that area? How long have you, been a social worker, and what sort of, just going back to mental health, just what do you think that can be done to really make sure that our kids are being prepared for, not just the end of this school year, but, going forward after the trauma that has happened due to COVID?
Completely. So my youngest client is 14 years old, and he, in the last year, the pandemic hit him and his friends really, really hard because they were isolated, they were fragmented, and they couldn't partake and they couldn't socialize the way normal teenagers should, right? So he became very depressed, and his parents were very concerned. And so for me, the pandemic, it affected all of us, in different ways, but children and teenagers it affected in a very distinct way because these are formative moments, formative times that were taken from them, in which they were kept in very small, apartments, and they couldn't interact and grow together. Because I think a part of being in school is to bounce off ideas to each other in real time and to be in spaces together, and they couldn't have that. So I worked with him to really get him to exercise where he could, and to really, have these virtual forums with his friends, and to really stay connected in some way, because I think this is a huge mental health concern. I have been at St. Mark's for over a year now. I work at St. Mark's Mental Health Clinic. I started off as an intern, and then they hired me afterward. And so I do see my labor there, even though I wasn't paid at first because I was an intern there. I do see myself as a worker there for over a year now, because I was doing free labor, which as a socialist I do consider work. And I do think that children in our community are those who are also forgotten about, and we must always engage them. We must always teach them. I would have loved to have been giving a lot of opportunities that current kids have right now in terms of, LGBT education, which I would love to have as a gay person, and in terms of other, amazing radical history that I learned about, right? I think these are amazing opportunities to engage and grow our kids, and to organize them, and to invest in them as future organizers in our community. And I think that these are things and pathways that we should be investing in for our kids, for us to continue to have this legacy of movement down here. And I fully support just the investment of all forms of education, and supporting our kids with mental health care as well.
Thank you. Donna, did I see you with the question? Yes, go ahead, and you can unmute yourself. There we go.
Hi. I would like you to tell us one great campaign that you engaged in as an organizer that you felt really achieved its goals or most of its goals, and why? And one campaign that fell short of its goals and why you think it did and what lessons were learned. And I would appreciate if you didn't use the standard kind of policy speak and kind of anchored your comments into your own feelings. You know, you on the ground as an organizer, and how you would bring that forward.
Completely. So I do a lot of organizing in the climate movement, and currently we're fighting to pass the Build Public Renewables Act, which would fight to give us public owned utilities. And we thought we might win this year. Maybe we were naive, but we thought we were close. We had a huge list of co-sponsors, and we were doing a lot of organizing, a lot of canvassing, and we were very hopeful. And at the end of the day, we were blocked because Kevin Parker, he did not fight for us, which is why my friend is trying to oust him. But it was hard because, I put my body on the line. I was arrested in direct action, for which, I'm still going to court, court showings for. And we thought that we had the momentum to possibly win, and then we didn't. And that was sobering, and it was heartbreaking in some ways, because we've been fighting for this fight for years. But at the end of the day, it also made me more committed to our fight, and maybe more gung-ho on trying to pass it next year. And a reason I'm running is to pass this bill as well in office. This is a movement, like a really multicultural movement, fighting for this bill. You pass this bill, and to see all these organizers alongside me grow in these past few years, and really go there and really develop as leaders, and bring more leaders into our fight, that was very exciting. But when we didn't pass the bill, it was sad for me, and it was sad for our group. But it was a good wake-up call to know that we're not always going to win in a few years. It might take some more time. I will say the NRG fight in Astoria, that was exciting. I was in and out of that fight, to be quite honest with you. I wasn't completely leading in that fight, but we obviously we killed the eco-socialist working group. We discovered what the NRG plant was going to be, and we led that fight. And as you may know, a few weeks ago, it died, right? And so this is an amazing example of what happens when the community comes together and blocks a frack gas power plant, which will poison that community from being built. And that was a huge victory for us, and we had a big party. So that was very exciting, and it heartened us, and it made us more invested in being a part of this climate movement. This climate movement, which affects many boroughs, including our own.
Thank you. We have a couple questions in the chat that I'd like to get to. We got a little more than 2 minutes left here. From CoDA Treasurer Jake Wolf, following up on Harvey's question, are you open to the concept of some level of municipal bonding at the state level, if, as you discussed, there is a funding shortfall from the federal government and direct funding is not available? He understands this is an active debate within the DSA community.
Yeah, I oppose privatization. Bonds themselves aren't the issue for me. I think municipal bonding is a long-established tool for financing public goods, and I do support municipal bonding in general at the state level. I'm always obviously going to look at how it looks like, and I know the very fight that I'm fighting for Build Public Renewables, that uses bonding as well. But we must always work in conjunction with the tenants of NYCHA, and listen to them and center them, and understand that their opinions come from a lived place.
Thank you. A question from Joyce Ravitz in the chat. Do you support the low-income housing on Haven Green?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, just do you support the low-income housing on Haven Green?
I'm gonna be honest with you, I am not familiar with this issue, and I look forward to reading more about this issue and
Absolutely.
learning more.
Hopefully after this, you can drop your info in the chat, and we'll members can follow up.
Thank you.
Let me see. We have about 1 minute left. We can get to one more question from the chat from Mike Schweinsberg. In your questionnaire, you say, quote, even if we must sacrifice travel lanes on the FDR, end quote, are you not concerned that doing so would cause all those cars would have no alternative but to clog our streets, posing innumerable problems for residents?
I think adding lanes induces demand in traffic, and removing lanes reduces demand in traffic. Traffic engineers and planners have established this in a lot of places. A recent example of this is the 14th Street busway, which removed car lanes, and there was no new net traffic on the surrounding streets. We must implement more sustainable transportation and movement solutions. I support bike lanes and bus lanes throughout the district, including accessibility, like pedestrianization and solutions for the blind. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for your both your thorough response to our questionnaire and for your answers here today. And thank you everyone for your questions. If you could drop your information in the chat, and members will be able to follow up with you for anything we were not able to get to today. Great. There's your email.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. We appreciate your time. Great. 3 down, 1 to go. Here comes Alana Sivin. Oh, great. There she is. Hey, Alana. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. So as we've been saying, we'll give you 10 minutes to give a speech, and then we'll do about a 15-minute Q&A period where we'll take questions, prioritizing CoDA members and those who have not yet spoken. So take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So hi, everyone. My name is Alana Sivin. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm running for State Senate in District 26. Huge disclaimer before I start, which is that I'm a pretty big hand talker, but I've noticed that doesn't really come across in Zoom, and sometimes my shoulders just move weirdly. So apologies in advance for that. And so before I sort of get started, I really want to say thank you for hosting this space. CoDA is a club that's really important to me. Even just looking at this Zoom and seeing everybody who's on here, there are a lot of people here who mean a lot to me. People who have been there in difficult times, and people who've been partners in movement and organizing both inside and outside of CoDA. So I'm really just excited to be here and to have this conversation with everyone and to build on some of the work that we've already done. So again, I'm Alana Sivin. I'm running to be the next state senator for this great district. And before I talk about why I'm running, I think it's important for those of you who don't know me to learn a little bit about who I am. So I started my legal career as a public defender, and that work was difficult because I was standing up every day in a criminal court system where whether someone goes home or is locked in a jail cell has nothing to do with justice and everything to do with the amount of money in their pocket, the friends they have, and the color of their skin. And for me, as somebody who is mixed race, it was really painful to stand up in this system and to see how people who looked like my mother's side of the family, who reminded me of that side of the family, were coming into the system constantly and were criminalized, brutalized, traumatized, while the few people I came across who looks like my father's side of the family were given all of the benefits of the doubt and who were given all of the opportunities to thrive that we all deserve. And so I felt these disparities really deeply. And I was able to be successful in the system to some extent. We got some acquittals, we're able to get some programs provided for people, but ultimately the system itself was so flawed. And I knew that I had to move to create solutions to change it. And so I started doing this initially in my free time. So I started while I was working as a public defender by co-founding Amplify Her, which was an organization focused on electing progressive women into office. I helped form out the policy of that organization. I also did some volunteer work with the Brooklyn chapter of the NAACP to form their advisory opinion on police body-worn cameras. And even after moving on to a different career, I've done a lot of this work in my free time as well, around police accountability and also around the judicial process. I've worked with folks here like John Blasco on developing a teach-in that taught judicial delegates the importance of electing decarceral judges and how to do that. But after so long doing this work in my free time, I then realized that this was something that I needed to spend all of my time doing. So I took a job working as the senior legislative counsel to the Criminal Justice Committee. And in that work, I collaborated with public defenders and people who had been formerly incarcerated to move legislation to improve jail conditions and to release people from jails. I also spoke out for the need to end solitary confinement. And I've coalesced with different advocacy organizations to bring essential funding to people involved in the sex trade. And so I talk about all these experiences to say that I'm somebody who has spent my career, spent my time taking collective pain and turning that pain into solutions. And that sort of mentality, that ethos is really emblematic of the Lower East Side. This is a really amazing place. It's the only place where someone like me who, and I always say this, somebody who is a Puerto Rican Jewish vegan who cannot drive can feel like home. And I live on the Lower East Side and I love it here, not just because of that, but also because we're just like this really great community of people who build collective power and people who problem solve. When I say that, I think back to the roots of the Lower East Side. I think back to when the New York branch of the Young Lords was formed back in the late 1960s, where we had working class Black and brown leftists who were building power with hospital workers to improve labor conditions and medical services at Gouverneur Hospital. And there are so many leaders like that who I have worked so closely with in this district. Like I think about the first time that I met Camille Napoleon of Baruch. We had met a few times over Zoom during the pandemic where we worked to partner with different restaurants to bring food to NYCHA residents. But the first time we met in person, she's at this, she's organizing a food distribution and she's working with people in the community who speak different languages. And she's hugging someone who speaks Cantonese and they're working together to bring food to folks. And she turns to me and she says, that's how we talk to each other here. We talk to each other with love. And, I think about that and I think about how that's the heart of this district. We are a community of problem solvers. We don't all speak the same language, both literally and figuratively. We don't come from the same places, but we all understand that we're here to help each other and we're here to get through these difficult times and that we can't do it alone. And so right now, in this community of problem solvers, we have a real problem. And that's that too many people are getting left behind. And you can see that when you walk through all the different parts of this district, from Wall Street to Smith Houses to Baruch. There are areas where billionaires grew $87.7 billion richer during this pandemic. And there are NYCHA developments where people can't afford food at their local grocery store because overdevelopment is making it so that people are getting priced out. This is the place where you'll find one of the 7 neighborhoods, the Lower East Side, that is the most impacted by mass incarceration. And it's also the same place where you find the criminal courthouse where Harvey Weinstein was able to buy his way out of jail during trial. And so I'm running because we can do so much better. We are better than that. We just need a problem solver who is committed to creating solutions the same way that every person in this Zoom is. We need somebody who, when there is a budget on the floor, who's going to stand up and say, if this budget rolls back bail reform, I'm not voting for it. We need a state senator who is going to tax the ultra billionaires on Wall Street so that people who are unhoused have a fair chance to thrive, so that we can have improved conditions in NYCHA, so that we can have small class sizes, and so that we can have tools that actually address violence and don't harm people. These are the things that we don't have, but as a community of problem solvers, we have the solutions. We can have real criminal legal reform, economic justice, dignified living conditions for everyone if we work together and if we elect someone new, if we elect someone who understands these experiences and who is ready to fight for all of the people living here, who is committed to solving problems and working alongside the best problem solvers in New York City to do it. So I'm really excited to work with you all to organize together and to solve our district's most pressing problems. And I'm just excited to keep talking. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Alana. We will give you an opportunity to keep talking as we open the floor up to questions. Like we've been saying, I'd like to prioritize CoDA members and those who have not yet had the chance to speak. So go ahead and use the raise hand feature. And let's see if we can get some questions for the candidate. Cheryl, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, Alana.
Hi, Cheryl.
My question is, I'm a big supporter of affordable housing, especially Section 8, being that I have lived in this building for 32 plus years. what can you tell me if you are elected as our senator? What kind of help would you be able to give the tenants that's living in Section 8 that's going through hard times with their landlord or management? What kind of programs can be established so we can have a Section 8 coalition so we won't be the ones that's being left out? I know like NYCHA's in an uproar, but we are the forgotten ones, Section 8 tenants.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think part of it comes to organizing. So I'll say, for example, I think when there is a Section 8 building, there needs to be some sort of access immediately to a counsel or to a lawyer when you're having an immediate problem in your building with management. So you should have the opportunity, if you're struggling with someone in management, with management, you should be able to contact a lawyer directly. And I'll say that's part of the constituent services piece of what I'm going to do when I'm in office, right? Like if you're coming to me with a management issue, we're going to get you connected with an attorney. And that's something that every single person living in any sort of housing should have. And then I'll say policy-wise, like there are so many different policies that we need to enact to make sure that people are safe in their homes, right? Like, for example, Just Cause is super important, and all the different housing platforms that are put together by the Housing Justice for All campaign.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to just call everyone's attention to the chat where we've reposted Alana's responses to our questionnaires. I'd like to echo the rest of the board's thanks, Alana, for filling that out so thoroughly.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I just add one more thing to that question too? I will say right now that and it's sort of in its infancy right now, but I'm actually organizing a Know Your Rights teach-in for specifically people who are dealing with issues with management. And Cheryl, I would love to talk with you specifically more about that. So let's stay in touch.
Okay, thank you.
Marielle, go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you, Alana, for being here today. My question is, why do you think you're, the best to represent this community? There are a lot of similar policies between you and some of the other candidates. So if you can just talk more about what sets you apart. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So I think there are a few things. So first, it comes to policy, right? Like nobody has my specific expertise when it comes to criminal legal reform. I would be the only former public defender in the state Senate. And that's really important at a time where we need somebody to combat fear mongering. But more importantly, I'm somebody who looks at this work as a community effort. I've worked in policy for a while. But what brought me to this work was working hand in hand with the people who are directly impacted by bad laws. When I came to the city council to work there, I worked hand in hand with people who are formerly incarcerated, people who are public defenders, to be able to figure out what legislation needed to be moved forward and how we do it. And that's the same way that I'm going to move legislation when I'm in Albany. I'm not going to vote for a single policy without first coming to you all, talking with you all first, and working hand in hand with the community, because this community is so rich in organizing and legislation, and all the way from the days of its infancy, from the late 1960s to the origins of this club that was specifically formed to challenge incumbency. And finally, like my job isn't just to go up to Albany. It's also to pick up the phone and solve the day-to-day problems in partnership with the community. Like when your landlord is harassing you, I'm going to pick up the phone and talk about how we address that, how we get you an attorney. When residents in your building need food, it's my job to connect you to food pantries, to the community leaders who are doing this work. Because we've seen for so long how community leaders have sort of had to pick up this slack. And I've already been supporting those leaders, working with those leaders, following those leaders. And I want to continue doing that as an elected official in partnership with those leaders who are doing this good work for the community.
Thank you. Thank you for that response. Mike, I see you. Did you have a question or? You can
Yes, but I mean, I don't think we've heard from Deborah, so I would defer to her. And then if you come back to me, if there's time, then let's hear from people who haven't spoken, have spoken a lot.
You got it. Deborah, go ahead, please unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Listening to everybody on the call today, I live in a Section 8 building like Cheryl, and we have a lot of disabled apartments. But what I'm seeing is that people are moving in that are not disabled. And I want to know from the candidates, how can we get these apartments to the people who need the apartments instead of them coming in and transforming the apartments? Alana?
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking about this for a second. So I think, thanks for that question. And I'm sort of thinking as I'm speaking a little bit, but I think the ultimate answer is that we need real oversight and accountability. You're right that people should not be you should be moving into apartments that are specifically designated for people who suffer from accessibility or disability issues. And so I think part of what accessibility looks like is not just sort of, state hearings and also calling for city council hearings, but it also means just like the regular calls from your state senator to say what's going on here and we're watching.
Thank you. Tito, I saw you. Yeah, go ahead. You can unmute yourself, Tito.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Elena. Excuse my voice. I've had the flu. So one of the issues I have a pet peeve about is that for many years I've been working on the ground, organizing in the community, and obviously I use and support elections because I feel that if you don't have your hand on the lever, then you really can't move things as hard as you want to. But I find that sometimes people that want to run for office will run, they get elected, and you no longer see them in CoDA. Harvey is certainly an exception, and my hat goes off to him. And if you win, I want you to commit yourself to come to CoDA as much as you can to report and to discuss, because I think the problem is that people forget their base, and that becomes a real problem. How would you deal with that?
So thank you for asking that question, Tito. I think I'll be an exception too, and I will commit to continue coming to CoDA. Again, I really value this club. I really value the community that's been created here in the Lower East Side. And yeah, absolutely. I think I think I need to not just come back to you all, but I also think that we need to make sure that our staff is representative of the activists in the community, hiring people from the community to make sure that we're consistently making sure that I'm not just reporting to CoDA, but that I'm co-governing with CoDA and with the great activists in this community as well.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alana. And thank you, Tito, as always, for your question. Denny, I see you. Go ahead.
Sorry. Hi, Alana. So I just quickly read some of your answers to the questionnaire, and I see you mentioning CLTs and funding CLTs in order to create more affordable housing. But I think what you also see in a lot of working class neighborhoods is a dearth in homeownership opportunities as well. So what policies would you support or enact to create homeownership opportunities for working class New Yorkers?
Yeah, I mean, I think one example is we need to pass the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. We are a city of renters, but I also think if somebody is a tenant in their building and the building is sold, tenants should have an ability to be able to purchase their unit. Again, we are a city of renters, so that's something to consider as well. But I do think the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act is a good start.
Thank you, Alana. Mike, looks like we can get to you. Go ahead when you're ready.
Good. Let me start out first by apologizing to Tito and to my entire community, because what I should have done is begun much earlier with an audio description. So Tito and everybody, I'm a white senior citizen with longish brown hair. I'm sitting before a 504 Dems banner with pillows propping me up, and I'm wearing a Tompkins Square Park Dog Run t-shirt. Okay. the other thing is, as I've, quizzed your opponents, I have to acknowledge just, how much you went out of your way, Alana, to not only include people with disabilities in many of your answers, you also prioritized us. You put us at the top of your list of marginalized communities to protect. That's extraordinary. And I want people to know that. And I just want to, express my very sincere appreciation for.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a question there? We appreciate the feedback, of course. I'm sure Alana does as well. But I'd love to get to a couple more questions if in our 6 minutes here remaining. Donna, I think I see you waving around there. Hey, Donna, go ahead, please.
So Alana, I want to ask a question about single payer, which I think all candidates support. And we as a club have been very supportive for many years. One of the big challenges of a single payer healthcare system in the state of New York for organized labor, and I happen to be president of a union in the city who does support single payer, but also recognize the challenge is that those of our members who are city workers, state workers, federal workers, when they do retire, they may not be in the city of New York. And so they've got to take their health insurance and it's got to be portable. So how can we design in our campaign for single payer a buy-in for organized labor so that our members who will be retiring out of state and maybe out of country, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, that this is.
Thank you, Don. I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off there. Alana, I think you get the gist of the question there, right? Are you able to address some of those concerns? I'm sorry, Donna, just running low.
Yeah, I think I know that Senator Rivera and Assemblymember Gottfried are working really closely with labor to address this concern. The New York Health Act would be statewide, not just citywide, but you're right. And these are nuances that do need to be worked out. And that's why it's really important to be honest, have folks like you, Donna, in this conversation as we talk about it moving forward.
Thank you. Elena, I believe you had a question. I know you can't raise your hand. Do you still, our Vice President, Elena Acosta, I believe had a question.
Hi, hello, everyone. I wanted to ask you a question about criminal justice. So we're wondering what you say in regard to criminal justice reform to one of our Democratic constituents who voted for both Eric Adams and Carlina Rivera.
I think there are a few prongs to this question. So I think there's the electoral question, which is why did that person vote for both candidates when they're so different? And I think ultimately what it comes down to is trust. People want somebody who is going to show up for them. I think we saw something similar in the Kavanagh campaign in Queens, where she won Queensbridge houses and so did Eric Adams. And that's because people want someone who's going to show up for them. And that's something that Carlina Rivera and Eric Adams have both done. They show up for community, and it's something that I've done as well. But I think the other bigger question is, how do we reach these folks on criminal justice? Like, what do we have in common? And believe it or not, I can relate to Adams voters. The other day, I was actually speaking to a couple that both of them voted for Eric Adams. And part of their reason was a huge part of our platform, which was bail reform, except they don't like bail reform. They had heard on the news that there was somebody who was out and who raped someone, and that this person, given their lengthy record, they thought, well, this person shouldn't be out. And I spoke to them about this, and I understood their concern, but I flipped it and I said, well, this person was arrested in the past over and over again, and every time that this person was arrested, went to jail, was traumatized by jail, came out worse. And so now we're at this point where this outcome has been produced where this person engaged in violent behavior. And what that tells us is that the system doesn't work. That's what everybody can agree on. Our current system doesn't work, and we need to find better solutions to create public safety. That's what everybody wants. That's what the Adams voter wants, and that's what the Carolina Rivera voter wants as well. And by the end of the conversation, when I was talking with this couple, they were on board. They were saying, let me help your campaign, like give me some postcards to give my friends. And I think it just goes to the fact that we really create this false dichotomy between public safety and decarceration. We put ourselves in these two camps, and we really don't have to do that, because what creates public safety are things that don't involve incarceration, things like cure violence, restorative justice, investment in well-lit spaces, and things like early screenings for dyslexia, which is something that Eric Adams talks a lot about. Those are the things that people want. And I think the other thing I'll say too is, I actually have very specific expertise in being able to convey this message. Like just my criminal legal reform expertise, and also just like I used to do media work where I would convey this message to different audiences from here in New York City to rural parts of Idaho. And I think that's really important in the state Senate that's been really susceptible to fear mongering. So.
Thank you, Alana. We've a little less than a minute left. John, is your question a quick one? Are you able to squeeze that in?
Yeah, it's a quick one.
Go ahead, John.
Hi, Alana. Thank you for being here. Quick question on, can you share some of your priorities on improving public transportation in our district specifically?
Yeah, so I think in this district specifically, I'm thinking about, well, I'm like in the CoDA district, which isn't necessarily our district. I'm thinking about the 12th and 13th Street bike lane and just like the need to have more bike lanes, period. And I think that's something that's important, not just for bikers, I myself am a biker, but also for pedestrians and people who need to make sure that they're not getting hit by bikers. So for that reason, it's important that we have protected bike lanes. But at the same time, we also need to make it so that all transit is accessible, so that we have things like pedestrian walkways on MTA bridges and stations. And we also need to make sure that our corners are protected as well, so that everybody can access them.
Thank you, Alana. And Io, I'm afraid I see you there, but we'll have to leave it where it is. We see Alana's information in the chat, and we can definitely follow up with her, I'm sure, to ask any questions we're not able to get to today. But unfortunately, we are out of time here. Thank you so much, Alana. We appreciate it. And thank you to the other candidates who also spoke today. We got a little bit of housekeeping now, just to address real quick. Let's see here. First things first, just a reminder for CoDA members here, you can pay your dues. There's the information in the chat there. Thank you, Alana. Yeah, you're Alana, you could head out if you'd like. Thanks so much. Sean, can we drop the link tree? I don't have it copy and pasted. I see a lot of new faces here, which I love. If you live in the district and you'd like to be a member of CoDA, you're not a CoDA member yet, obviously we'd love to have you. We have quite a few of these forums coming up in the next 2 months. Obviously all the other races going on, and we'd love to have everyone here. We appreciate everyone's time, especially the executive board and CoDA membership for getting this together. Thank you so much. And thanks again to Senator Kavanagh, to Vittoria, to Illapa, and to Alana. And then just one last reminder. Oh, we'll send out the screen recording of this. This has been recorded. So this whole rambling speech right now, you'll get to watch again in your emails later this week. And then last thing, just for members, as you know, we have an endorsement meeting this Thursday. Anyone who has been a CoDA member in good standing for 30 days or longer is eligible to vote, and we will discuss the 4 candidates that we saw today. I think that's everything. Thank you all so much.
I just want to say thank
John,
you so much to Joshua, Andrea, Jake, Sean, and Elena, our executive board, for putting on a really awesome forum and for really working hard on this. So thank you to the board.
Thank you, John, always. And as everyone knows, you can always email CoDA with any questions, contact us on Instagram, always be in touch, and we'll see members on Thursday. Thank you, everyone.